Picture this. You're opening a Toys R Us. You grab your keys, turn on the lights, walk the aisles. Everything kind of seems normal. Except there's a candy wrapper where there shouldn't be one. A bag of Peanut M&Ms missing from the checkout lane. You kind of shrug it off. Another missing bag. Someone mentions hearing strange noises at night, though, and another employee notices dusty footprints near the stockroom. And then, one morning, you look up. One of the ceiling tiles isn't sitting quite right, and you finally decide to call the police. They pull down the tile and discover something unbelievable. Someone has been living above the store. Not for a night, not for a weekend, for months. There's a mattress, television, food wrappers, even signs that whoever was living there had been coming down at night while employees were gone. And suddenly, there was an answer to the question, where were all those bags of peanut M&Ms disappearing to? Hi, hello, and welcome to another episode of True Crime Culinary, the show where we explore the strange intersection of food, history, and true crime. Today we're diving into my number one absolute favorite sweet treat. I have been a huge fan of these little morsels since my single-digit years, and they've been a tempting treat ever since. Today we're talking about the one, the only, M&Ms. I actually have a near permanent stash of chocolate in my house. That is how deep my chocolate addiction runs. I like to blame it on the German side. I have a daily allotment. I can't have it first thing in the morning, otherwise my whole day is just kind of off. It has to be after something savory. So après lunch usually is the time. And I'm very fortunate that I'm married to somebody whose love language is to keep my chocolate stash stocked. Every time he goes shopping, there's a whole demonstration session afterwards of the types of chocolates he purchased, the flavors, the decisions he made, the size of the bag, the variety. It's a wonderful thing. One of the many reasons I'm very lucky, and also why there is balance in this household and I don't lose my mind because there's no chocolate. So as I was eating some of my M&Ms, I finally thought, hey, where do these marvelous morsels even come from? And I thought about the guy in the opening story. Did you happen to guess who that was? Because if you thought Channing Tatum, you're kind of almost there. We're covering the story of the Roofman because part of how he survived for months in the store is with peanut M&Ms. So hold on to your hands because we're melting into a crazy story. Let's start at the beginning. The obvious problem, chocolate doth melt. And depending on the recipe, chocolate starts softening right around body temperature, which is super wonderful when you're eating it, but it's not so wonderful when it's in your hand. And the solution is deceptively simple. Wrap the chocolate. And wrap it in sugar if you want to make the wrapping edible. That M&M crunchy shell is not just decoration, my friends. It is a protective coating made by building dozens of incredibly thin layers of crystallized sugar around the chocolate center. Think of it almost kind of like a pearl. Basically, you add layer upon layer until you end up with a chocolate that has its own sugary suit of armor. How cute. The shell slows heat transfer, keeps your fingers from touching the chocolate directly, and protects it during shipping. Now, to be fair, leaving M&Ms in a hot car will result in them melting. Any type of pressure change will create one large mass of shattered sugar and chocolate. Could be someone's delight. I'm not going to say that it's not mine. But versus other chocolates, it survives very well. Which kind of made me wonder, well, how did they come up with this process? And so to answer that, we need to meet our friend, Forrest Mars. That name might sound familiar because his father, Frank Mars, founded the Mars Candy Company and created enormously successful chocolates, including the Milky Way. But father and son unfortunately did not get along. Forrest was brilliant, driven, competitive, and by many accounts, a little bit of a difficult person to get along with. The two frequently argued about the future of the business, and eventually Forrest was like, I gotta go, you can't tell me how to live my life, and left the United States and began expanding Mars overseas, particularly in England. However, the Spanish Civil War entered the chat. In 1936, the country split between the Republican government and nationalist forces led by Francisco Franco. The conflict quickly became much larger than Spain. Nazi Germany and fascist Italy got involved, and also the Soviet Union. And so journalists, volunteers, and business travelers from around the world passed through Europe as the war unfolded, including Forrest Mars. who reportedly noticed soldiers eating chocolate covered in hard sugar shells. He noticed it wasn't melting all over their hands, and that factoid really stuck in his craw. And the funny thing is, to this day, no one knows exactly what those chocolates were or are, like what the recipe was. There's no diary anywhere, there's no photograph, and most historians believe it was probably like a British confection called chocolate beans or something sort of similar. Key takeaway, it wasn't Forrest who invented the idea, but he certainly figured out how to make it happen back home. And this process is actually called panning. Kind of imagine a concrete mixer, but change the cement for like little balls of chocolate, or it could be like a peanut, something that the additions stick to. You're rolling the mixer and you dump in a scoop of liquid or powder at a time. And as the turner mixes, everything keeps rolling around. Every little chocolate morsel or peanut or whatever gets a little bit of that coating. And so over time, you build it up to evenly sized morsels. You can then add different types of layers. So you could start with, for example, the peanut, coated in chocolate, then add the sugar. There's also, it looks like kind of a fan or some sort of like exhaust that helps keep the temperature right. But that's kind of like visually what we're going for. It's very satisfying to watch on YouTube should you be struck by the desire to follow up. So Forrest sees the opportunity to market these delicious little happy balls of chocolate. Well, they're kind of like flattened balls. In any case, in 1941, he partnered with Bruce Murray. That's actually where the name M&M comes from, Mars and Murray. Our friend Bruce wasn't just another businessman. His father was an executive at Hershey. And so during World War II, chocolate supplies were being tightly controlled. And that little move of partnering with the Murray family helped guarantee access to chocolate needed to manufacture M&Ms. Super smart business decision, and the timing could not have been better because the US military needed food that could survive shipping around the world, and chocolate bars less than ideal because of, see above, melting thermodynamics. So they thought, you know what travels better? M&Ms. They're compact, shelf-stable, easy to carry, delightful, a treat for the eyes and the mouth. And so they gave the soldiers a welcome taste of home. And in fact, for a time, M&Ms were sold almost exclusively to the military. They're actually part of a much longer tradition of armies relying on candy. I've read a lot of stories, I think all the way back to, is it the Incas, who gave sweets to their soldiers to keep them, I don't know, happy is not the right word, but in some way stable. In fact, chocolate became common in World War I. The famous Hershey D ration, which kind of sounds like a wrapper, was designed to survive terrible conditions. And later during the Korean War, Tootsie Rolls even became an unexpected, useful survival item because they stayed edible in freezing weather. Arguably edible, but also an adventure for the jaw. In any case, even now, M&Ms go to space because they're delicious, easy to transport, and they don't leave crumbs. I think that's such a cool little fact. So when World War II ended, returning soldiers already knew the M&M candy. And now civilians were like, yo, I want some. Demand exploded, and with demand comes imitations. So in 1950, Mars began printing a tiny letter M on every candy. Originally, that M was black, and then a few years later, they made it white, which is what we see today. Another thing they did is they doubled down on marketing. The original slogan, one that I think we all kind of know, is like, it melts in your mouth, not in your hand. But at some point, Mars kind of wanted to get more personal with its marketing, and so it came up with those personalities, with the actual M&M personalities. These animated mascots became some of the most recognizable advertising icons in the world, and I bet you've seen them anywhere from Christmas time to a board meeting, and they have their own little skits. Then came one of the strangest marketing campaigns ever. I guess strange or wonderful, depends on where you're coming from. In 1995, Mars announced they were introducing a new color. Now, in 1995, I was just about 10 years old, and I kind of remember some of this. People got to vote between the choices of a blue M&M, a pink M&M, or a purple M&M. Millions of people participated. Blue won. And then there was some sort of uproar because there was a rumor that they were going to get rid of the brown M&M. And so because the fans were unhappy, they just said, okay, we'll just scoot in the blue. We won't get rid of the brown. And may I say, great decision. Although M&Ms have like a million different types, sizes, like I alone in this household, I think we have had peanut butter, caramel, pretzel, crispy, regular, peanut butter and jelly filled, almond filled. I want to say dark chocolate also. So there's like a bunch of variations, but the actual base M&Ms have stayed remarkably stable. And Mars itself is privately owned. and known for being incredibly secretive. I heard and read that executives rarely give interviews, they blindfold people they bring in, they hide parts of the company from each other, and having just traveled to Egypt, it kind of gives like hidden cavern pharaoh vibes where like between the dynasties they don't talk to each other and they're kind of like, we have a cave of wonders, but we're not going to tell you where it is. But apparently that's like totally the vibe with Mars. That's also why they're not on the Fortune 500, because they're still a privately held company. So this theme of mystery brings us back to our mystery man. Police eventually identified Jeffrey Manchester, nicknamed the Roofman. You've probably heard of him because there was a movie made recently, I think it's called The Roofman with Channing Tatum. But in case you haven't seen it, before hiding above a Toys R Us, Jeffrey Manchester had spent years robbing McDonald's restaurants using skills he'd learned in the army, including like weapons handling and climbing and rappelling, to execute said robberies. His overall shtick was to hide inside a McDonald's overnight, wait for employees to arrive in the morning, then force them into the freezer while he emptied the safe. Oddly, almost everyone described him as polite, which I kind of think the word is oxymoron. Like, trauma's still trauma, but I guess it's better to have like a polite trauma than like a really rude trauma. I'm just saying, kind of a weird combo. Apparently he also apologized. He asked people if they were warm enough while going into the freezer. And one employee even remembered him offering a coat. So yeah, dozens of robberies, I think up to about 60. So prison, just not his jam. He's like, I gotta keep using these skills. It's my hobby. So while working in the prison metal shop, he escapes by hiding beneath a delivery truck. And that's when he disappeared, ends up at the Toys R Us. And while he's there, he builds a whole life for himself. He's got basically an apartment in the Toys R Us, including a mattress, a television, and nightly trips into the store for supplies, which included baby food, and Peanut M&Ms. It finally all came crashing down when investigators found a fingerprint on a DVD. Can you guess the DVD? If you said Catch Me If You Can, 5 M&Ms for you. While he's doing this whole double life, because mind you, he has like an ex-wife and children, the girlfriend he has while he's living in the Toys R Us gets contacted by the police, I believe, and helps arrange a meeting where the police arrest him again. And yes, if you're wondering, he has tried to escape yet again. I think he's being locked up for about 40 years. So all in all, next time you're wondering where your M&Ms disappeared to, make sure to check the pantry. Make sure to check your space shuttle, and only after that, maybe check the ceiling. Until next time, stay curious and be careful what's in your cup. Check out our show notes for sources, hit that subscribe button, rate and review the podcast anywhere you listen.